All right, miss, I'll answer it. Hello, Dr. Ginsburg here. Oh, Inspector Craig's here. Good. Ask her to come up to room 14, will you? Thank you. How's it going, Lanson? Got it fixed up?
Yes, Dr. Ginsburg. I'll plug it in there.
You are sure about this now? We can't afford to have a slip-up.
Oh, sure, doctor. It'll work a treat.
Good. A little less formal, nurse. Move those chairs a bit. That one a little bit over there.
Careful. What is this thing?
New electrical gadget.
Oh, one of those.
Trouble with you people is you have no respect for science. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Inspector. Everything's ready.
Is this the contraption?
Yes, it has been well tested.
It works perfectly. The least touch will make the connection. I guarantee there will be no hitch.
Can you show me?
Yes. You see, you put this in between the patient's forefinger and thumb here, and they connect. It lights up.
Ah, I see.
All right, Lanson, that will be all. Thank you. Has Nurse Cartwright got the patient ready?
Yes, doctor.
Nurse Bond here is going to stay and assist me during the experiment.
Oh, good. That's very kind of you. It's no problem at all. I never would have gone off duty had I known that Mrs. Wingfield was unduly depressed.
Nobody's blaming you, nurse. You said the others have arrived?
Yes.
All four of them?
All four of them. Brian Wingfield, Emmeline Ross, William Ross, and Brenda Jackson. They can't leave. I've posted my name.
You must understand, Inspector, that the well-being of my patient comes before anything else. At the least sign of collapse or undue excitement, any indication that the experiment is having an adverse effect, I shall stop the proceedings. You understand that, nurse?
Yes, doctor. Quite so. I shouldn't expect anything else. You don't think it's too risky?
If I thought it was too risky, I should not permit the experiment. Mrs. Wingfield's state of paralysis is due to shock. Her temperature, heart, and pulse are now normal. Nurse, you are already acquainted with the family. Go down to the waiting room and ask them to come up here.
Well, here we go.
Yes.
Let's hope we have luck. Have any of them been allowed to see her?
Let me check. Her husband, naturally, and her brother and sister for a few moments. The nurse assigned to look after her, Nurse Cartwright, was with her the whole time. Miss Jackson, however, has not seen Mrs. Wingfield, nor asked to do so.
Quite so. You'll give them a little preliminary talk, will you? Put them in the picture.
Certainly, if you wish. You said that Mrs. Wingfield fell from the second-story balcony?
Yes. Yes, she did.
Remarkable, really, that she wasn't killed. Head contusions, dislocated shoulder, fracture of the left leg. Ah, good afternoon, Miss Ross. Will you sit down? Mr. Ross. Good afternoon, Mr. Wingfield.
You sent for us. It's not my wife. There's not bad news, is there?
No, sir, no bad news.
Thank goodness. When you sent for us, I thought there must have been a change for the worse.
There is no change, neither for the worse, nor alas, for the better.
Is my sister still unconscious?
She is still completely paralyzed. She cannot move or speak.
Oh, it's terrible. Simply terrible. Was Miss Jackson with you?
She was following us. Dr. Ginsburg, my secretary, Miss Jackson.
Good afternoon.
Poor Jenny. What a terrible thing to happen to anyone. Sometimes I feel it would have been better if she'd just been killed outright by the fall.
No, anything but that.
I know what you feel, Brian, but it's a living death, isn't it, Doctor?
There is still hope for your sister, Mr. Ross.
But she won't stay like this. I mean, she'll get better, won't she?
In cases of this kind, it is very difficult to forecast the progress of a patient. Her injuries will heal, yes. The bones will knit, the dislocation has been reduced, and the wounds in her head are nearly healed.
Then why shouldn't she get well again? Why shouldn't she be herself again in every way?
You were touching there on a field which we are still ignorant. Mrs. Wingfield's state of paralysis is due to shock.
The result of her accident.
Her accident was the ostensible cause.
Just what do you mean by ostensible?
Mrs. Wingfield must have suffered unusual fears as she fell from the balcony. It is not so much her physical injuries, but something in her mind that has produced a state of complete paralysis.
You're not saying, you're not thinking what I'm sure the inspector here has been more or less suggesting. That my wife tried to commit suicide? That I don't believe for a moment.
I haven't said I thought it was suicide, Mr. Wingfield.
You must believe something of the kind, or you and your people wouldn't keep hanging around like vultures.
We have to be sure as to the cause of this accident.
Isn't it simple enough? She'd been ill for months. She'd been feeling weak. Up for the first time. Or practice the first time. Goes over to the window, out onto the balcony, leans over, gets giddy, and falls to the ground.
Don't get so excited, William. Don't shout.
It's all very well, Bunny, but it makes me mad all this business. Do you think it's pleasant for us having the police mixing themselves up in our family affairs?
Now, Bill, if anyone should complain, it's myself, and I don't.
What have we been asked to come here for?
One moment, Miss Jackson. Miss Ross, I wish you could tell me a little more about your sister. Was she at all subject to fits of melancholy or depression?
She was always highly strung, nervous.
I wouldn't say that at all.
Men don't realize these things. I know what I'm talking about. I think it is rather probable, Inspector, that Jenny's illness had left her feeling particularly low and depressed, and that with other things that she had to worry.
Miss Jackson, where are you going?
I'm leaving. I'm not one of the family. I'm only Mr. Wingfield's secretary. I don't see the point of all this. I was asked to come with the others, but if all you're going to do is go over and over again about the accident, whether it was accident or attempted suicide, I don't see why I should stay.
But it's not going to be the same thing over and over again, Miss Jackson. We are about to make an experiment.
An experiment? What kind of experiment?
Dr. Ginsberg will explain. Sit down, Miss Jackson. Dr. Ginsberg.
I better perhaps recapitulate what I know or have been told. Mrs. Wingfield has been suffering in the last 2 months of an illness somewhat mysterious in nature, which was puzzling the doctor in attendance on her, Dr. Slaughter. This I have on authority of Dr. Slaughter himself. She was, however, showing decided signs of improvement and was convalescent, though there was still a nurse in the house. On the day in question, exactly 10 days ago, Mrs. Wingfield got up from her bed after lunch. She was settled by Nurse Vaughn in an easy chair near the open window, it being a fine, mild afternoon. She had books with her and a small radio. After the nurse saw the patient had all she needed, the nurse left for her afternoon walk, as usual. What happened during the course of the afternoon is a matter of conjecture. But at about 3:30, a cry was heard. Miss Ross, who was sitting in the room below, saw a falling body cross the window. It was the body of Mrs. Wingfield who had fallen from the balcony. There was no one with her when she fell, but there were 4 people in the house. The 4 of you.
Perhaps, Mr. Wingfield, you would like to tell us just what happened then, in your own words.
I should have thought I had told it often enough already. I was correcting proofs in my study. I heard a scream, a noise from outside. I rushed to the side door, went out on the terrace, and found poor Jenny. Emmeline was with me a moment later, and then William and Miss Jackson. We telephoned for the doctor, but then...
Yes, Mr. Wingfield. There's no need to go into any more. Miss Jackson, will you tell us again your side of the story?
I had been asked to look up a reference in the encyclopedia from Mr. Wingfield. I was in the library when I heard the commotion and people running. I dropped the book and came out and joined them on the terrace.
Mr. Ross?
What? Oh, I've been playing golf. Always play golf on a Saturday. I'd come in, eaten a hearty lunch, and was feeling whacked. I laid down in my bed upstairs. It was Jenny's screams that woke me. At first, I thought I was dreaming. Went over to my window and saw the row down below. There she was on the terrace, with everyone else gathered around her. Have we got to go over this again and again?
I only wanted to stress the point that no one who's in the house can tell us exactly what happened that afternoon. Except, that is, Mrs. Wingfield herself.
It's perfectly simple, as I've said all along. Poor Jenny thought she was stronger than she was. She went out onto the balcony, leaned over, and that's that. perfectly simple accident. Could have happened to anybody.
Someone ought to have been with her. I blame myself for leaving her alone.
But she was supposed to rest in the afternoon, Brian. That was part of the doctor's orders. We were all going to join her at 4:30 for tea, but she was supposed to rest every afternoon from 3 o'clock until then.
Miss Ross, the accident seems a little difficult to explain. The railings of the balcony did not give way.
No, she got giddy and overbalanced. I tested the railings myself afterwards. It could easily happen.
Mrs. Wingfield is a very small woman. It wouldn't be so easy for her to overbalance, even if she was taken giddy.
I hate to say it, but I think you're right in what you suspect. I think that poor Jenny was worried and troubled in her mind. I think a fit of depression came over her.
You keep on saying that she tried to commit suicide. I can't believe it. I won't believe it.
She had plenty to make her depressed.
What do you mean by that?
I think you know quite well what I mean. I'm not blind, Brian.
Jenny wasn't depressed. She had nothing to be depressed about. You've got an evil mind, Emmeline, and you're just imagining things.
Leave my sister
It
alone.
was an accident. Of course it was an accident. Miss Ross is just trying to...
Yes. What am I trying to do?
It's women like you that write anonymous letters. Poison pen letters. Just because no man has ever looked at you.
How dare you?
Women, cut it out, both of you.
Really, I think we're all getting rather overexcited. What we really want to know is, what was Jenny's state of mind on the day she fell? I'm her husband. I know her pretty well, and I don't think for a moment that she tried to commit suicide.
Because you don't want to think so. You don't want to be responsible.
Responsible? What do you mean by responsible?
For driving her to do what she did.
Please. When I asked you to come here, it was not my intention to provoke recriminations.
Really? I'm not so sure.
No, what I had in mind was to conduct an experiment.
We've already been told all that, but you still haven't told us what kind of experiment.
As Inspector Cray said just now, only one person knows what happened to her that afternoon. Mrs. Wingfield herself.
And she can't tell us.
She will when she's better.
I don't think you quite appreciate the medical position, Miss Ross. It may be months, even years, before Mrs. Wingfield comes out of this state.
Certainly not.
Yes, I won't go into a lot of medical details, but there have been people who have gone blind as a result of shock and have not recovered their sight for 15 or 20 years. There have been people paralyzed and unable to walk for the same periods of time. Sometimes another shock precipitates recovery, but there's no fixed rule. Ring the bell, please.
I'm still not quite sure what you're driving at, Doctor.
You're about to find out, Mr. Wingfield.
Jenny, darling.
What's going on? What are you trying to do?
As we have all agreed, Mrs. Wingfield is the only one who knows what happened to her that afternoon.
But she's unconscious. She may be unconscious, though, for years, we said.
I did not say unconscious. Mrs. Wingfield cannot move or speak, but she can see and hear. I think it highly probable her mind is as keen as it ever was. She knows what happened to her. She would like to communicate it to us, but she can't do so.
You think she can hear us? You think she can understand what we're saying? What we're feeling?
I think she knows.
Jenny, darling, can you hear me? This has all been terrible for you, I know. But it's all going to be all right.
Inspector,
I'm ready when you are.
I said Mrs. Wingfield cannot communicate with us, but it is possible a way has been found out. Dr. Payne, who has been attending her, and who is an expert on this form of paralysis, became aware of a slight movement of the fingers on her right hand. It is very slight, hardly noticeable. She cannot raise her arm or lift anything, but she can very slightly move the two fingers and thumb on her right hand. Miss Lanson has fixed up an apparatus of a certain electrical nature. You see there is a button. When the button is pressed, the light appears on the apparatus. The slightest pressure will operate. When you're ready, nurse, uncover the patient's right arm. Between the thumb and two fingers. Gently. Now I'm going to ask Mrs. Wingfield some questions.
Ask her questions. What do you mean? Questions about what?
Questions about what happened to her on that Saturday afternoon.
This is your doing!
The experiment was suggested by Miss Lanson and myself.
But how can you possibly put your reliance on what might be purely muscular spasms?
I think we will soon find out whether or not Mrs. Wingfield can understand what I'm saying and answer my questions.
I forbid you to go on with it. It's dangerous for her. It'll set her recovery back. I won't agree to this. I won't allow it.
Ryan, Mrs. Wingfield's health will be fully safeguarded, I assure you. Nurse, at the least sign of collapse, you know what to do.
Yes, doctor.
I don't like this. I don't like it. I'm sure you don't like it. Do you? I think it might be interesting.
Inspector, I hope you're
for a
Quiet,
second.
please, quiet. We must have absolute quiet. The doctor is about to begin.
Mrs. Wingfield, you've just had a very narrow escape from death and are now on your way to recovery. Your physical injuries are healing. What I want is this. If you understand what I am saying, try to move your fingers so that you press the bowl. Do you understand? You have understood what I am saying and can answer my questions? Now, what I propose is this. If the answer to the question is yes, press the bowl once. If the answer is no, press it twice. Do you understand? Now, Mrs. Wingfield, what is the signal for no? Now, I think it is clear to you all that Mrs. Wingfield can understand what I am saying and will answer my questions. Now, I am going back to the afternoon of Saturday the 14th. You have a clear recollection of what happened that afternoon? As far as possible, I will ask you questions that will save you too much fatigue. I will assume, therefore, that you got up from your bed after lunch, that you were settled by Nurse Vaughn in an easy chair near the window. You were alone in your room with the window open. You were supposed to rest until 4:30. Am I correct? Did you, in fact, sleep a little? And then you got up? You went out on the balcony. You lost your balance and fell? You fell? But you did not lose your balance. You were giddy, fell faint?
Inspector, I wish...
Mrs. Wingfield, we've come now to the point in the experiment when you must tell us what happened. I'm going to say over the letters of the alphabet. When I come to the letter of the word you want, press the bowl. I'll begin. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P. You have given me the letter P. I'm going to hazard a guess. I want you to tell me if I'm correct. Is the word in your mind push? Please, quiet, please. I cannot have the patient agitated. Mrs. Wingfield, clearly you have more to tell us. I'm going to spell out again. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M. You have given me the letter M. I assume that is followed by a vowel. Which vowel, Mrs. Wingfield? A, E, I, O, U. N, U. Is the next letter R And you are. Mrs. Wingfield, are you trying to tell us that what happened that afternoon was not an accident? Are you trying to tell us it was attempted murder?
This is nonsense! Jenny doesn't know what she's saying! She doesn't know what she's saying.
I think she does.
Mrs. Wingfield, did some unknown person come from the outside and attack you? Was it someone in the house who pushed you?
Good heavens.
Her pulse is quickening.
Not much further. We must have the name.
Mrs. Wingfield, do you know who pushed you? I'm going to spell out the name. Do you understand? Good. A, B. You have given me the letter B. Is that correct?
Doctor, she's collapsed.
It's no good. I better go on.
Is she going to be all right, Doctor?
She'll be all right. Strain and excitement may have been too much for her. She must rest. We will resume in about half an hour.
I forbid you to go on with it. It's dangerous for her.
I think you must allow me to be the best judge of that. We'll move her near the back. She'll be all right there.
Not much doubt, is there, who she meant? B. Not much doubt about that, is there, Brian?
You always had it in for me, Emmeline. You always hated me. I tell you right here and now, I didn't try to kill my wife.
But do you deny that you were having an affair with that woman there?
It's not true.
Oh, don't tell me that. You were head over heels in love with him.
All right, then. I was in love with him. But that was all over ages ago. He didn't really care for me. It's all over, I tell you, all over.
In that case, it seems odd that you stayed on as his secretary.
I didn't want to go. All right then. I still wanted to be near him.
And perhaps you thought that if Jenny were out of the way, you'd console him very nicely and be Mrs. Wingfield number 2.
Emmeline, for heaven's sake!
Perhaps it's B for Brenda.
You horrible woman. I hate you. It's not true.
Brian and Brenda seems to narrow down to one of the two of you.
I wouldn't say that. It could be B for brother. Or Bill.
She always called me William.
After all, who stands to gain by poor Jenny's death? Not me. It's you. You and Emmeline. It's you two who get her money.
Please, please. I cannot hold all this arguing. The patient must rest. The nurse will take you down to the waiting room.
We can't stay cooped up and overrule us accusing each other.
You can go where you please on the hospital premises, but none of you is actually allowed to leave the place.
Is that understood?
All right.
Yes.
I have no wish to leave. My conscience is clear.
I think you did it.
What do you mean?
You hate her. You've always hated her. And to get the money, you and your brother.
My name does not need the B, I'm thankful to say.
No. No, but it needed. Supposing that, after all, Mrs. Wingfield didn't see who it was who pushed her off the balcony.
Well, she has told us that she did.
But supposing that she didn't. Don't you see what a temptation it might be to her? She was jealous of me and Brian. Oh, yes. She knew about us. And she was jealous. And when that machine there gave her a chance to get back at us, at me, don't you see how tempting it might be to say Brenda pushed me? It could have been like that. It could.
A little far-fetched.
No, it isn't. You know what women are like when they're jealous. And she'd been cooped up in her room all that time, thinking, suspecting, wondering if Brian and I were still carrying on together. It could easily be true.
It is perfectly possible, Inspector.
And you do hate her.
Me, my own sister.
I've seen you looking at her often. You were in love with Brian. He was half engaged to you. And then Jenny came home from abroad and cut you out. She told me the whole story one day. You've never forgiven her. I think you've hated her ever since. I think you came into her room that day, you saw her leaning over the balcony, and it was too good a chance to be missed. You came up behind her and you pushed her over.
Inspector, can't you stop this kind of thing?
I don't know that I want to, Miss Ross. I find it all very informative.
I'm afraid I must insist on your leaving now. The patient must rest. We will resume in about 20 minutes. The nurse will take you down to the waiting room.
Miss Ross, would you mind waiting a moment?
Well, and what is it?
There are one or two questions I should like to put to you. I didn't want to embarrass your brother.
Embarrass William? But you don't know him. He has no self-respect at all. He's never ashamed to admit that he doesn't know where to turn for the next penny.
That's very interesting, but it was your brother-in-law who I thought might be embarrassed by the questions I'm about to ask you.
Oh, Brian. What do you want to know?
Miss Ross, you know the family very well. A person of your intelligence would not be deceived as to what went on in it. You know the lives of your sister and your brother-in-law, and what the relations were between them. It is reasonable that, up to now, you would say as little as you could. But now that you know what our suspicions are, and the way they've been confirmed only a minute or two ago, well, that alters matters, doesn't it?
Yes, I suppose it does. What do you want me to tell you?
This affair between Mr. Wingfield and Miss Jackson, was it serious?
Not on his part. His affairs never are.
There actually was an affair.
Well, of course. You heard her. She as good as admitted it.
You know it of your own knowledge.
I could tell you various details to prove it, but I do not propose to do so. You will have to accept my word for it.
It started when?
Nearly a year ago.
And Mrs. Wingfield found out about it.
Yes.
And what was her attitude?
She taxed Brian with it.
And he?
He denied it, of course. Told her she was imagining things. But you know what men are. They'll lie their way out of anything. She wanted him to send the girl away, but he wouldn't. Said she was far too good a secretary to lose.
But Mrs. Wingfield was very unhappy about it.
Very.
Unhappy enough to want to take her own life?
Not if she had been well and strong. But her illness got her down. And she got all kinds of fancies.
What kind of fancies, Miss Ross?
Just fancies.
Why was Mrs. Wingfield left alone that afternoon?
And she preferred it. One of us always offered to sit with her, but she had her books and her radio. For some reason, she preferred to be alone.
Whose idea was it to send the nurse off duty that day?
In private nursing, it's standard practice. She would have had 2 hours off every afternoon.
Miss Jackson has told us that it was all over ages ago, referring to her affair with Mr. Wingfield. Do you say that that was not so?
I think they broke with each other for a while. Or perhaps they were very careful. But at the time of the accident, it was on again all right.
You seem very sure of that.
Well, I lived in the house, didn't I? And I'll show you something. I found it in the big moon vase on the hall table. They used it as a post box, it seems.
Darling, we must be careful. I think she suspects. B.
It's Brian's writing, all right. So you see?
Do you mind if I ask a question or two?
No, doctor. Please do.
I'm interested in those fancies you mentioned, Miss Ross. I assume you had some particular fancy in mind.
Just a sick woman's imagining. She was ill, you see, and she felt she wasn't making the progress that she should have done.
And she thought there was a reason for that?
Well, she was just upset.
She thought there was a reason for it.
Well, yes.
She thought those two were poisoning her. That's it, isn't it?
Yes.
And she said so to you?
Yes.
And what did you say?
I told her it was all nonsense, of course.
Well, did you take any steps yourself?
I don't know what you mean.
Did you discuss it with the doctor attending her? Take any samples of food?
Of course not. It was just a sick woman's fancy.
Well, it happens, you know, a lot more often than is known. The symptoms of arsenic poisoning, it's almost always arsenic, are almost indistinguishable from gastric disorders.
Brian couldn't. He just couldn't.
It might have been Miss Jackson.
Well, yes, I suppose so. But we will never know now.
You were quite wrong there. Traces of arsenic can be found in the hair, you know, and in the fingernails.
I can't believe it. I won't believe it of Brian. Do you need me any longer, Inspector?
No, Miss Ross. I'll keep this. It's evidence.
Yes, of course.
Well, we've got something.
Yes, from the mean vase in the hall. Interesting.
It's in his writing.
Oh, it's in Brian Wingfield's writing, all right. You know, He was quite a one for the ladies. Bowled them over like 9 pins. Unfortunately, they always took him seriously.
Doesn't strike me as the Casanova type. Writes all those historical novels. Very erudite.
Well, there's quite a lot of dirty history.
So it wasn't all over.
Get 4 people all worked up and accusing each other, getting a bitter and malicious woman on her own and invite her to spill the beans. It gives one some material to work on, doesn't it?
In addition to what you had already, what did you have?
Just some good solid facts. I went into the financial end. Brian Wingfield's a poor man. His wife's a rich woman. Her life is insured in favor of him. Not for a very large sum, but it would enable him to marry again if he wanted to. Her money came to her in trust. If she dies childless, it's divided between her brother and sister. But the brother's a wastrel, always looking to get money out of his rich sister. According to Brian, she told her brother she wasn't going to pay for him anymore. But I dare say she would have done in the end.
So which is it? B for Brian, B for Brenda, B for Brother Bill, or Emmeline without a B?
Emmeline without the... Emmeline. Wait a minute. Something I heard this afternoon while they were all here. No, it's gone.
Could it be B for burglar?
No, that's definitely out. We've got conclusive evidence on that point. The road was up in front of the house, and there was a constable on duty there. Both the side and the front gates were directly under his eyes. Nobody entered or left the house that afternoon.
You know, you asked me to cooperate, but you've been very careful not to put all your cards on the table. Come on, what do you think?
It's not a question of thinking. I know.
What?
I may be wrong, but I don't think so. You think it over. You've got 7 minutes.
Oh, Mrs. Winfield. Mrs. Winfield, thank you for all your help. We've come now to the crucial moment in the experiment.
Mrs. Wingfield, we are about to leave you here apparently unguarded. None of the suspects knows that you regained your powers of speech yesterday. They don't know that you did not, in fact, see who pushed you off that balcony. You realize what that means.
One of them will try to.
Someone will almost certainly enter this room.
Are you sure you want to go through with this, Mrs. Wingfield?
Yes, I must know. I must know who.
Don't be afraid. We shall be close at hand. If anyone approaches you or touches you,
I know what to do.
thank you, Mrs. Wingfield. You're a wonderful woman. Just be brave. A few moments longer, and we shall trap our killer. Trust me. Trust both of us.
Ready?
Right.
You might want to come into my office. In view of that poisoning suggestion, we should look over the files again.
Yes, I'd like you to look at those x-ray plates, too, if I may. And that constable on duty, he swears no one entered or left the house that afternoon. So it seems you didn't take your off-duty walk that day. You may come out from behind the curtain now, Nurse Bond.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming out tonight. I hope you enjoyed our production of The Patient. I can tell you for sure that we in the drama class enjoyed it. I remember the first time that we read it, people were saying, oh, it's the doctor. I know it's the... No, are you kidding me? It is Emmeline. Do you see how nasty she is? So, that got me thinking, what if it wasn't Nurse Bond? So, I wrote some additional endings so that you can see who else might have done it. I hope you enjoy them.
Mrs. Wingfield, we are about to leave you here, apparently unguarded. None of the suspects knows that you regained your powers of speech yesterday. They don't know that you did not, in fact, see who pushed you off that balcony. You realize what that means.
One of them who will try to.
Someone will almost certainly enter this room.
Are you sure you want to go through with this, Mrs. Wingfield?
Yes. Yes. I must know. I must know who.
Don't be afraid. We shall be close at hand. If anyone approaches you or touches you,
I know what to do.
thank you, Mrs. Wingfield. You're a wonderful woman. Just be brave a few moments longer and we shall trap our killer. Trust me. Trust both of us.
Ready?
Right.
You might want to come into my office and give that poisoning suggestion. We should look over the file again.
Yes, I'd like her to look at those x-ray plates too, if I may.
Unfortunately, money doesn't last. So it seems you weren't in your library that afternoon. You may come out from behind the curtain now, Mr. Wingfield. Emmeline!
That's right. It was me. I've always hated my sister. She was always the best. My mother always wanted to know why I couldn't cook like her, or sing like her, or be like her. And then Brian came along, and none of that mattered because I had him. But then Jenny came, and she took him from me too. So yes, I pushed her off the balcony, and I would have gotten away with it if it weren't for your meddlesome machine.
They don't know that you did not, in fact, see who pushed you off that balcony. You realize what that means.
One of them will try to.
Someone will almost certainly enter this room.
Are you sure you want to go through with this, Mrs. Wingfield?
Yes. Yes. I must know. I must know.
Don't be afraid. We shall be close at hand. If anyone approaches you or touches you,
I know what to do.
thank you, Mrs. Wingfield. You're a wonderful woman. Just be brave a few moments longer, and we shall trap our killer. Trust me. Trust both of us.
Ready?
Right.
You might want to come into my office. In view of that poisoning suggestion, we should look over the file again.
Yes, I'd like her to look at those x-ray plates too, if I may.
Never once did they think it could possibly be me. After I planted that note in the mean base, I was not suspected. Not even once. I think that Ginsberg was beginning to realize what was going on. That's why I had to get rid of her too. Come along, Brian. We've got a plane to catch.
That's good.
Drama class will help the seniors say goodbye. At this time, we'd like to thank our parents for always being there for us and supporting us. And we'd especially like to thank Mrs. Hauser for aiding and abetting us in all of our theatrical endeavors. part of the night where we must thank the people who made this show possible. First of all, I'd like to thank Mrs. Hankins for making these wonderful signs for us. I don't think she was able to join us tonight, but I came to her last week, I think it was Wednesday, and I said, I need some signs for the play next week. Do you think you can help me out? And she sure did. Rush delivery. She got them all done, and she did a great job, as always. So thanks again, Mrs. Hankins. Next, we need to thank Mrs. Turner for helping us get through some awkward stages in our acting. We had lots of saying that the patient was all right. Well, we hadn't touched her or looked at her or anything, so she helped us figure out what nurses and doctors actually do. Thank you, Mrs. Turner. The next person I'd like to thank, I don't see here tonight, but Maddie Traynor did a great job designing the playbills. So if you see Maddie, tell her good job and thank her. Now the next person I'd like to thank, I need her to come on up to the stage. This person has persevered through many trials this year. She has sat in our 8th period drama class, and somehow she is still here. Miss Riley, would you please come to the stage? Miss Riley, we truly do appreciate everything you've done for us this year. Thank you so much. And now, we have one last person to thank. Our fearless leader, our captain and commander. Oh, Captain, my captain, please come forward. Mrs. Hauser. She has made this show possible. Everything she does has led us to this moment where we could utilize our acting. But really, this is
now you know why drama class is so much fun. I just never know what I might get.
But we really do appreciate all that you've done for us this summer.
You got me. That was a lot of fun. Yeah, as you can see, it is a lot of fun, and it's now comes the time that you always, I know, are all dreading, where I say, please open your purses, but you've been generous with us in the past, and I ask you to continue that way. Each year I'm able to buy a few more things. The lights are a little bit better. We've got drapes, we've got better sound equipment, walkie-talkies backstage. Every year it gets a little bit more, thanks to your generosity. So Luke, if you'll pass the hat, please. All right, now comes the time that's really hard for me each year, but it's the time to recognize the seniors, because this is the last time that I'll get to work with them in performing. And that's tough, because by 4 years of working together in this kind of silliness that you just saw, surprises, it gets tough to say goodbye to them. But we certainly do wish all of them well. First of all, I have Miss Kendyll, who has a beautiful voice, and wasn't she wonderful earlier this year? And so her beautiful voice will be missed. But something you might not realize is she's also been the choreographer this year. And I have a lot of Mrs. Bell sort of movements that I tell her, and she's been able to figure it out and know just what might work on stage for me and put it in a way that they can be taught and understood. So thank you, Kendyll. You'll be missed. Maggie, 4 years years Maggie's been around. When she was a freshman, and I looked at her, she was like a scared little bird. But I knew that this bird could sing, and I just had to find a way to help her find her voice and find her confidence. And my, this year, has she not found her voice? Sweet Maggie, quick with a smile, and such a passionate, sweet, loving heart. A heart that really worries about the unfortunate people in society and always looking for ways to comfort them. That sweetness I really will miss. There you are, our doctor of the evening. Let me tell you a funny story about my Elizabeth. Elizabeth came to me as and everything was a giggle, you know, and I wondered, oh boy, get beyond this, you know. But each year she just wanted more and more of her confidence. And last year she looked at me like I was, you know, that look, still fighting mental health, Mrs. Hauser. She gave me that look when I said, you know, I think you're ready to command the stage with Charlie, just you and Charlie. And she kind of looked at me, but I knew she could have that presence. And she did. And not only did she have to be on the stage alone with Charlie, she had to yell at him and run up those stairs and slam the door. And she did. And what you didn't know was the rest of the cast would go under the stage and wait for her, because as soon as she got out the door, she'd go, oh, that was good. Elizabeth has also been my stage manager for 4 years, and this is a big job. Not only is it the running of the show the night of the performance, but for 6 months she sits by me at every rehearsal writing down everything that I say, so that I can look at the actors and not pay attention. And then when someone forgets a line or when did I move, she's got the record of it. And it's a very disciplined job, and one that's not easy, particularly with the shenanigans that goes on with this crew, as you just saw a moment ago. It's hard to pay attention to detail, yet Elizabeth has done it. And I just can't even fathom what next year is going to be like without Elizabeth by my side. So Elizabeth. Again, 4 years of working together. It's hard to sum up all the Charlie-ism moments that we've had along the way. But I've appreciated his perception, his intuitive nature, and his genuine kindness to bringing others around. Some over the years who have not had the ability that he does, and yet as a leader should, he has gently brought them along and tried to help them be better actors and just generally better people all around.
I'm sorry, Drew caught my eye.
See what I have to deal with all the time. And I knew early on that Charlie had the ability to be a leader, so after putting him in different positions over the years to kind of encourage that, got him working with the Logic dramas. He assistant directed those last year and this year, and then of course directed this show, and I think he did a marvelous job.
And also the rhetoric drama class wanted to thank you, Charlie, for all your hard work you put into this show and everything. We're going to miss you, so this is from the class.
Well, thank you.